Alright, in this lecture, we're going to be going over how to create still life drawings from life. Now, drawing from life is extremely important, and we've already been over this, but now I want to dedicate a whole section to drawing from life. Now, why is drawing from life so important? Well, drawing from life is really important because all of your artwork is going to be based off of real life. Whether you're drawing artwork that are objects from everyday life, or you're creating your own worlds in fantasy worlds, you're still going to need to know how real life works. And the thing is, everything cannot be proved and shown by using math, formulas, and rules. Sometimes you just have to actually look at objects and draw them exactly the way you see them until you understand how they work. And then you can become a great artist. So it's very important to draw a lot of objects from real life that have really good lighting on them so you can understand how lighting and how perspective and values and contrast and shapes work. It's the best way to learn. So let's go ahead and get started with the basics of drawing from life. So the first thing that you need to know about drawing from life is you're trying to copy and mimic exactly what you see. Now, that's not to say that you can't make any small changes to make it look better, but for the most part, you want to try to copy the exact shape, the exact value of your object. So the first thing we're going to go over is how do you take a measurement of your object? Well, the way you do this is by taking your pencil and you're going to hold it in front of your object. Okay, so we're going to hold this to about here. And then what you want to do is you want to put your finger and mark where the end of your object is. So now you have that measurement of your object. You want to make sure that your arm is completely and fully extended so that every time you take this measurement, it's the same exact distance so you get the same proportions. If you don't, if I move this closer, well, now it changes, and so I'd have to move my thumb to there. And so if I keep going back and forth and trying to take measurements of this fork, but from different distances away from my eyes, then that's going to mess up my measurements. You want to make sure that every time that you have your arm extended all the way out, so it's the same every time. Once you get that measurement, then what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and take this measurement on your pencil and you can lay it down on your paper. And then using a second pencil, you can go ahead and mark from one end to the other. And now you know the distance for that object. Now, depending on how close the object is, that's going to determine how big your object will appear on your paper. So right now, it would be pretty small. But if I were to get closer to my object, you'll see that it becomes a lot bigger. I mean, I can make it as big as my pencil, and if I bring it all the way towards it, you'll see that my pencil isn't even big enough to capture the whole fork. So that's also a really important thing, is how close is your object? The closer it is, the larger it'll be on your paper. The further away it is, the smaller it's going to be. So if I bring my pencil all the way up to here, my fork is very small. So now if I bring this back, you'll see my fork has a very short distance now if I were to mark that on my paper. So you're going to take some basic measurements when you're drawing from still life. You're probably going to take the width of your object, and then you're also going to take the height of your object. So I would take the height of my object, just like so, and I'd want to take the tallest part of my object, which is this part of the fork. So once you've taken your measurements of your object, you're going to go ahead and transfer those measurements onto your paper. When they're on your paper, you're going to go ahead and start sketching within those guidelines, which are your measurement lines. And then you can work from there. The point of taking the measurements is to make sure that you get the correct proportions throughout your entire drawing. Now, let's have a look at the three basic types of drawing techniques when it comes to creating still life drawings. So the first one is called cross-hatching. So what is cross-hatching? Well, cross-hatching is a very popular way to create sketches. And what it is it's very similar to drawing with cross-contouring lines. The only difference is that these lines will cross each other in different directions. So for example, let's go ahead and add some shading to our sphere. So I'm going to start off by adding my cross-contouring in for my main shadow, which is going to be my core shadow. Then next what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some cross-hatching lines in there. So cross-hatching lines are just going to cross with these lines, and the more they cross, the darker it's going to create the illusion of value. So I'm going to go ahead and add some cross-hatching in for my core shadow, like so. And now that area appears to be darker, and I can even add in a skinnier line of that cross-hatching right through the middle of that to darken the middle of my core shadow. And then I can even add another light layer of cross-hatching in, like so, to darken this area, to also help blend it into my highlight. And then we can go ahead and add in our cast shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and sketch the shape of my cast shadow. And then to create our cast shadow, we can just add in some diagonal lines like so. And then we'll do the same thing coming in the other direction, because this is cross-hatching. So basically all cross-hatching is crossing lines that create values. The more you cross them and the darker the lines, the more value or the darker the value is going to be. Now let's go ahead and move on to our next type of drawing technique. Now, there are other drawing techniques besides these ones, but these are the most commonly used ones, and so we're only going to be going over these ones. Now, blending is something that we've used up to this point, and so what blending is it's basically just layering in your values. So we would start with our lighter value, and then we'd start to introduce a darker value, and we just start layering in darker and darker values. And we try to blend these in by pushing a little bit harder as we get to the other value, so it can slowly blend into the next one. So our darker value blends into our lighter value, and then our lighter value blends into our highlight. Now this process can take a little while, but it can also look very good. So now that I have my mid-tone shadow in there, I can go ahead and add in my core shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and add it in like so. And I'm starting out a little bit lighter, and we'll continue to darken that core shadow, but we just want to make sure that we're blending those two values together very well. And we do that by drawing very lightly and in layers. All right, now let's go ahead and add in that cast shadow. So I'll go ahead and draw that shape, and we can slowly add in that value. And I want it to fade out as we get to this end, so I'm going to slowly add in my first light value, then I'll add in a little bit darker value, and it'll end a little bit sooner. And then I'll go ahead and add in my last value, like so. And so now I have a nice blend between all those values. All right, now let's go ahead and move on to the last one. So the last drawing style is called rendering. And what rendering is it's basically starting out with a neutral value for our background, and then we draw and create highlights on top of that. So let me show you what I mean. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and lightly put in a nice mid-gray background. Just like so. Then we're going to go ahead and grab our eraser, and we're going to erase away our highlight. So my highlight is going to be somewhere about in here. And make sure you don't do too dark of a background, otherwise you're going to have a hard time erasing it. All right, so now we have our highlighted area. I'm going to go ahead and blend that in just a little bit more, like so. And then we can go ahead and add in some darker areas. So I might add in my core shadow right along here. Basically what we're doing is we're starting out with a mid-neutral color, which is our gray background, and from there we're going in and we're finding where our object is, and we're creating it by adding in highlights and dark shadows. But we already have our midtone because our entire drawing is covered with our midtone. All right, great. Now let's go ahead and add in our cast shadow. So I'll go ahead and sketch that shape in. Then I'll go ahead and add it in just like so. And so that's rendering. Now there are other places where you'd use rendering and it would be a lot more effective. For example, if you have gray tone paper, which is just a mid-tone gray paper, there are colored pencils that are called Prismacolors, which you've seen me use a blue one in this course so far. But these colored pencils allow you to draw on top of mid-tone colors. And so I could take a white colored pencil and draw on top of the gray tone paper, and that would allow me to add in my highlights, and then I can take a black colored pencil and add in my dark shadows. And that mid-tone really neutralizes my piece of artwork and makes it a lot easier to create my drawing because I already have a mid-tone background. So I don't have to worry about any of my mid-tones. I only have to worry about my shadows and my highlights. All right, that brings us to the end of this lecture. So in this lecture, we learned how to take measurements of an object from still life so that then we can put them onto our paper and then sketch that. Next, we learned the 3 basic sketch types that we'll be using to create our still life drawings. So the first one is cross-hatching, which is where you have cross-contouring lines that cross with each other, such as down here in our cast shadow where we have crisscrossing lines to create that dark value. Then the next one is blending. Blending is just where you lightly layer your values until they get darker and darker, until you get to your darkest value, and that way you create that nice blend between all of your values. Then the last one is rendering, where you start off with a neutral background, which is a mid-tone gray, and then you erase out or add in your highlight, and then you add in your dark shadows, so you don't have to worry about your mid-tone colors. Thanks for watching this lecture, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next one where we're going to draw a still life of a banana and some fabric. And we're really going to start understanding how real life works through sketching from real life objects.